local party.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Darkling Chronicles. I have some military ghost stories for you. I did say in the last one that I would probably do that this time and it just felt right. So I went on Reddit and I found some really good ones. I'm going to get straight into it, but before I do, thank you so much to everyone new here who has followed me, who is listening to the podcast. I actually have been requested to do some merchandise. I didn't think you guys would want that. However, I have been proved wrong. Now, not everyone will want merch, but we are now a community. We are the TDC Club. I've put you in it, whether you want to be in it or not. I'm not even sorry about that. What I've done is the font behind me, if you're watching the video of this, the Darkling Chronicles podcast, I have changed that to the Darkling Chronicles and the scary picture of me in here as well as a ghost. And I've made basically a t-shirt in a few different colours. You can get it in black, navy, white, and army green or something green. Anyway, the same for the hoodies. Apart from the hoodies, I added a burnt orange because my kind of like vibe is orange for the Darkling Chronicles, and it always has been. So I've added an orange one in too, and I've also done a really cool black mug with this logo on, and my god, it pops. I've had to use a dropship company, so you have to bear with me. I've tried to set the price as good as I can. I am not joking when I say just make a few quid profit. Okay, the rest of the money is going to for me to not have to deal with the production costs. So the dropship company that I use essentially charged me a fee and then charged me a delivery fee, and I've factored the delivery into the costs, so everything is all good, all kosher. I've tried to keep it as cheap as I can so that you guys can represent and support the channel just like you always do at just hopefully not ridiculous prices. That's one thing I absolutely hate. If I could do them for much cheaper and I had a stock room where I can actually buy them in for much cheaper so I could charge you a lot less, I would. And trust me, in the future, I will be doing that if it is a success. Obviously, it's an unknown. I have no idea how well it's going to do, but if you want to go have a look at it, you absolutely can. Now, let's get into tonight's stories. First of all, though, I hope you're okay. Let me know in the comments how you are. Let me know how your week's been. Any tea? Any tea to tell us? You probably can't write it in the comments if it's really good. Or you could if you're daring. Wherever you are right now, whether you're walking, sitting, running, all the ings, traveling, I hope you're good. And I don't know what time of day it is for you, but I hope you've had a brilliant day. And if you haven't started your day yet, I hope you have a fantastic day. Okay? I'm just going to be really aggressively positive towards you because you deserve it. Before I get into the stories, I just have to tell you of this new YouTube page that I found. They obviously, I have no idea who they are. I'm not getting paid to talk about them or anything. I found this and I was like, oh my god, I have to share it with you guys because you guys are going to love it too. If you go on YouTube and you type in, hang on a minute, just trying to find it. It's called FFF True Paranormal. And I am not kidding. I've been binging the absolute hell out of it. It's got like actors who recreate the tale as the real people who experienced it are also kind of documentary style telling the story of what unfolded. And I've got to admit, they have made me poo my pants. The atmosphere, everything to do with it, the way the stories are told. If you want a good channel to binge, honestly, it's way better than mine. You should definitely go binge it. Now let's get into these military ghost stories. This person deleted their name, so I can't credit them, and they wrote it 7 years ago. And they've titled it My True Military Ghost Story. I think a bloke wrote this. Let's just assume a bloke wrote this. I have read it, but I can't remember of any parts that maybe have indicated to their gender, so I'm not sure. Anyway, he says, this particular story might sound cliche, but it actually happened. It took place when I was in the Air Force and stationed in Louisiana. I won't mention the name of the base, but I'm sure that there are many people out there that will know which one it is when I mention some of the details to this story. This story took place a few years after I had been stationed there. I first arrived to this base in 2006, and upon my arrival, I, along with many other troops, were greeted with many different horror stories. There were stories about a man in a top hat who walked a dark, long and narrow dirt road on the outskirts of the storage facility area. There was also another story about a crazy man who was hit by a patrol car and ran off into the woods next to the same place. But my story relates to a separate story that was told to me. It was my second night on shift, as I recall. I was posted with an airman who had been there for several years. He gave a rundown about some little girl who had been visiting her father when the storage area we were working in was being constructed, which was well before any of our time. The story went that the little girl was playing on some of the structures while her father was working, but had fallen to her death by slipping off the edge at the top of the structure itself. Most of the story didn't make sense to me at the time, but regardless of the fact, it still scared the shit out of me. To make matters worse, the airman had taken me to the exact place where the supposed story took place. He shut off the engine and turned the music off as we just sat there in silence. He startled me a few times, but nothing ever happened. Now, skip forward about 3 years, I was scheduled to work that particular spot on the base this night. Keep in mind that I had been visiting this spot for years now, but at this point the storage area had been completely closed down except for a few minor areas, which required us to do physical drive-throughs and checks of this area. The shift had started out pretty shitty. Me and my alpha, aka partner, had been given a cattle truck to do this patrol, as our normal vehicle was in the shop for maintenance. Yeah, I shit you not, a cattle truck. I know this part doesn't sound very important to the story at the moment, but it will tie in with the story eventually. So to save time, let's skip forward a few hours. We were scheduled to do 3 random checks of the storage facility that night, and we had already completed 2 out of 3 prior without any issues. So come about 4 o'clock in the morning, we decided to do our last check, seeing as all the maintenance guys had gone home for the night in this area. The only way to access this area was by 2 very large separate gates, which took forever to open. We pile in, lock the gates behind us, and continue on our way. My alpha was driving during this check, and I was the spotter who used the flashlight to check the lock on each structure. An important detail that I left out, which may be necessary here, is that the story of the little girl had taken place on a road within the storage area, which we call Echo Street. By this point, everything was fine, and we'd finished our rounds. My alpha makes the final turn down Echo Street. We had both been pretty talkative during most of the night, and we were just shooting the shit, when I got an uneasy feeling. Something felt different, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. We were about halfway down the road when things became almost completely and frighteningly silent. Even the rumble of our cattle truck and the faint noise of the radio playing seemed to become less audible. As we approached the structure from my previous story, and I must stress at this point that even telling or typing this part still brings a chill down my back and makes my eyes tear up in fear. But as we approached the structure itself, I turned my head to the outside of the window opposite the structure, and out of my left ear I hear a sound that nearly caused me to piss myself. It was the sound of a person groaning or moaning in distress, sort of like the moan of the little girl from The Grudge. Yes, I'm very serious. The faint creepy moans began to ring inside the cab of the truck, between the two of us, in between the dark emptiness of the middle seat. I feel my blood turn cold, and I quickly turn to my alpha and yell, "Dude, cut that shit out!" My alpha turns to me with a confused look on his face. At this point, he begins to take his foot off the accelerator, and he asks, "Am I going too fast?" I remain silent for a moment, with my hand in a pausing gesture, and I listen. I hear the noise again. My partner interrupts and asks, "What's wrong?" I quickly turn the music off without saying anything at first, and then I whisper to him, "Did you hear that?" He stops the truck in confusion and listens closely. It was almost dead silent for a second or two, when we both hear it this time. That long, chilling groan of a woman. It echoed into my ears. It sounded like someone was struggling to breathe and taking in a giant breath of air while someone was trying to strangle them. The sound was beyond terrifying, and the fact that I wasn't the only one hearing it only made it even more horrifying to experience. I found myself beginning to ask him my original question again. But he quickly interrupts and says with a strong sound of fear in his voice, "What the fuck was that?" We stupidly waited to see if we could hear it again. The rumble of the gates on the back of the truck are easily heard and recognised, as they made a sort of metal on metal clatter, and the diesel engine has a typical rumble as well, but in between both the noises we hear it again for the final time. That groan, it sounds even louder. But this time, it sounds like it's coming from both inside and outside the truck, like we're being surrounded by whatever was making this noise of distress. Without even making a peep, my Alpha puts the truck in drive and he hauls our asses off that street quicker than I've ever gone on any street on that entire base. He nearly flips the truck going round a curve, but we don't care one bit. We were both in an unspoken agreement that we wanted to get out of there quickly. We got to the 2 gates again and I hopped out the truck as fast as I could. My Alpha watched my back as I quickly opened both gates. He jumped back into the driver's seat, sped out and waited for me to close both gates as well. Once we completed that task, we quickly returned to the main part of the base and we requested to meet with our flight chief to tell him what had happened. When we finally meet with him, we expected him to think we were both full of shit or that we had just imagined the entire thing being as it was late into our 12-hour shift and we were both tired. But I clearly remember him saying to us both, "I completely believe you." As a matter of fact, I had something like that happen to me twice. Once in that same place and the other in that building behind you, as he points to our jailhouse. Again, I know that sounds completely cliche with that grudge-like moan we heard, but it honestly happened and it still brings those tears of fright into my eyes every time I tell it. I went back to that storage area only once after that, but I never went down that road again and I would never have gone in the dark. What I find really interesting is that normally it's the analytical mind of the man who doesn't believe in spirits. That program I told you about at the start of this channel, every single episode infuriates me because when there's an episode with a couple, the woman is going through all of it first. The man is telling her it must be her mind playing tricks on her, all of this kind of stuff. Until he has his own experience and then she's all of a sudden got to be like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" When he didn't give a shit about her, and what she was going through. So if you're going to watch it, be prepared to be a little bit angry about it. But they do redeem themselves after some time. There is an episode where a woman doesn't believe her husband, and she annoyed me too, because she has got that analytical mind too, and that really frustrated me. Just be ready. But it's brilliant. It's suspenseful. You're going to love it. But this analytical mind normally does come from people who are in the military. So isn't it fascinating that their bases, most places, bases, right? You're welcome. They're haunted. And yet none of them are really talking about it. I mean, thank God for Reddit so that they've got an outlet at least to discuss what they've been through. It must make you feel like you're going crazy when you have an experience on such a high level. But at least his chief had seen it as well. So he could say, "No, it's okay, I believe you." But also get some paranormal investigators in there. Get some people in. I know they don't want to highlight it because it's military. They've got government base. They've got to keep it on the hush because, God forbid, if anyone believes that ghosts are actually real or gets proven that they are actually real, the government have got some explaining to do about most of the things in this world that they try and hide from us. So there's that. But, on the low, on the down low, just for your own self-interest, if you're the chief there, get a paranormal investigation team in. Get this grudge sound recorded. Awful sound, by the way. It has put me in a state of pure PTSD trauma because that and the ring scared the absolute shit out of me when I was younger. That phone ring and then you die 7 days later, not for me. That discombobulated woman from the grudge climbing up walls and stuff and coming towards you with that sound, with the hair, absolutely not for me. The only thing that made that film okay for me in the end was Scary Movie, when Brenda has a fight with her and she's like, "Cindy, the TV is leaking," or something, whatever she says. Oh, I love it. Anyway, right, I'm digressing. Let's go back to the stories. This next one is from someone called Jamie Lynn, and she wrote it 6 years ago. And she says, "I'm in the army. This is what I've experienced on the military bases." She says, "Fort Sill. I was there for basic training. Every night we took turns doing the fire guard." Now we know what fire guard is because we have heard a story before, unless you haven't heard that story. Basically, she explains it anyway. So it's basically where 2 soldiers rotate every hour to watch the door and make sure everyone stays in bed. There were 4 barracks bays. Ours, the female bay, was upstairs and across the hall from a male bay, but we used separate stairwells. So us females and drill sergeants were the only ones using this centre stairwell. The drill sergeants would come up and check on us periodically. We could clearly hear when they went into their bay across the hall. So every now and then we would hear footsteps come all the way up the stairs and stop. Neither of the doors would open and we'd never hear them go back down. We even heard objects rolling down the stairs. She's wrote it in capital letters, so this has traumatized the hell out of Jamie Lynn. Is that what her name is? Can't remember. Yeah, Jamie Lynn. She's traumatized. You could hear them hitting every individual step as they went down. It was so scary. After lights out, everyone had to stay in bed. We had to let the fire guard know if we were getting up to use the bathroom, and no showering was allowed after that time. There were times when we would hear people talking in the bathroom in the middle of the night and sometimes hear the showers going. So we would go and look because we would all get in trouble if anyone was up making noise, but no one was in there. I should also mention that the lights are motion censored. So we would walk in and the lights would turn on, meaning a physical person hadn't been walking in there for at least a few minutes. One night, we all got woken up by a scream right next to our row of beds. All of us sat up at the same time, freaking out and looking at each other. We couldn't figure out where it had come from. And then she's wrote Fort Pickett. So this is a different location now. This was 2019 during our annual summer training. We were in the field, which is basically like camping in tents. There was a large open field where the medical tent was. And then our personal tents were back in the tree line. There were a few nights where people were woken up by something shaking their tents, whispering their names or giving them vivid nightmares. Some even saw figures standing outside their tents. Some people had dreams they were woken up only to be in another dream. I was with another sergeant in a 2-person tent, far off to the edge of the group. One night I heard footsteps all around our tent, almost circling it, as if a whole platoon was walking past us, slowly. But our medical area was so far away from all of the other training areas, and as far as I knew, no one was out training at 2 a.m. that day. And she's putting out Fort Indian Town Gap. That must be another location. My ex used to tell me, while he was sleeping, that he saw a man or figure standing next to the bed or in the corners of the room. He often saw a man with a moustache. I didn't know who it could have been, but anyway, fast forward to another annual training. We have some free time one day, and most of us decided to go back to take naps in the barracks. The girl in the bunk next to me was asleep for about an hour when she woke up and asked me if she had been screaming. She said she had just had sleep paralysis and thought she was awake in her awake dream. She was in the same barracks with all of us, but we were all staring at her. But the thing that got me, she said, there was a man with a moustache standing next to my bunk. He was bent over and was the only person looking at me instead of her. She's a complete skeptic, and I had never told her about what my ex saw too. There must be nothing more satisfying than all of you waking up to the scream, knowing that you're all not going absolutely out of your damn mind. Because I would imagine that military training is very intense. You're tired. There must be a lot of emotional demand on your body, a lot of physical demand on your body. And I can only imagine the state of fatigue that must put you in. But if you're all waking up and you're all hearing it and you're all shitting yourself, there is definitely something going on. And to put in capital letters that something was bouncing or moving down the stairs, this really affected her. You can tell, can't you? Like, she's just like, no, this happened. Like, I'm gonna capital letter this shit so that you can feel the impact of it, because it's real. And my initial gut feeling with that mustache man is, I also really believe that, yeah, you can say that you're proud of your country, you're proud of people who go and fight and stuff. Those people are incredible. It's the level above that I have an issue with. People who are in higher positions, moving men like pawns, men and women like pawns, making them feel proud to fight for their country. But it's also for these rich people's agendas because they want to do something or get more oil or do something like that. And these people are really proud of their jobs, and I love that for them. Just like any human being should be proud of what they achieve in life. But my issue is the system above them that puts them in these positions to kill people and call it a job. I know they don't always do that, and I know a lot of it is training, and, you know, there has to be a war to kill people, but we've had plenty of those. And my feeling is that essentially, because it's a job of death, you attract quite dark things to you. These dark spirits must be attracted to the military camps for a reason as well. I'm not saying all of them are dark, but if you think about it, you're being trained to kill, which means that there's an energy there that these things can feed off, because that's how they get their energy. Like, we are their source of food depending on what we're thinking. So if you're always thinking negative things and you're quite angry, you are a perfect dinner for them. Whereas if you're positive and, you know, you have a really good outlook on life and you're just naturally happy, you know, or you're we're not all happy all the time. I'm talking you have to be in a proper low vibrational state of trauma constantly for these things to seek you out. It's not just having one bad day and then getting an attachment. It's not that kind of level. But I really believe that this mustache man must be some form of negative attachment. Because if these people have served, we don't know if they've killed people. We don't know what that actually means for our soul and our spirit. I just know that we're not meant to kill each other. We're not meant to do that. And I really believe that it opens this energetic portal within us once you have killed someone, because we're not meant to, because all of our souls are connected. There's just something within that where I just believe that something negative can come through. And for that spirit to be looking at her and not the lady experiencing the sleep paralysis, that's kind of freaky, because it shows that it's following her and her boyfriend around, just feeding off them or something. I don't know. Let me know what you think of that. I don't really explain things very well sometimes. I'm just kind of like flying off the seam of my pants on this podcast as well, excuse the expression. But it feels like there is definitely something within that, and the military is going to have some kind of open portal for things like death, because it's in such a brutal way. I can't even imagine what it must have been like fighting in Iraq and places like that. The things that people have seen, and this is what I mean, you have to give massive respect to them. They are doing it for reasons they believe are like pure and true, and you can't blame the people going to do the job. It's the establishment above them feeding them the lies that they have to do it, you know. That's just my opinion. You might not like that, but that's fine. I don't mind if you don't like it. I believe that, you know, it's fine to feel really proud of your country. It's fine if you do believe in, you know, the military and all of that kind of stuff, but I just have a bigger standpoint on it. And it's just a shame that a lot of people have lost their lives. There was a guy in my year called James. He lost his life. He stood in an IED. I think that's what you call them, isn't it? Where they kind of blow up. He was in Iraq or Iran. Anyway, he stood in it and he died, and he left behind his girlfriend and his little newborn son, which, you know, is horrific. And I just think, for what? Like, for what? Like, what actually came of that? Anyway, I'm ranting now, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. This next story is from someone who deleted their name, and they wrote it 3 years ago, and they say, military experience I've recently had. So for context, I am in the Navy. I work occasional security in a naval base in Ventura County. I say occasionally as I am more of an auxiliary type help to man security at the gate/ECPs, and security is not my primary job. Anyway, one of the gates was recently renamed after Eric L. Knott. He was a CB, or Navy construction worker, who was killed by enemy mortar fire in Fallujah in 2004. That's all I knew about it. He was a young guy who was killed, and it was named in honor of him. But I then heard something else. That unit is garrisoned in that base when not deployed. While standing the night shift on a Saturday night, me, a CB from NMCB4, and a third unimportant person were shifted at Knott Gate. 3 a.m. pulls around, and there is not a soul in sight, not even the occasional car driving through the intersection. We are all struggling to stay awake when car headlights partially blind us. I step out to greet the driver and check his credentials. His credential and ID card looked legit, and I noticed that he had the same last name as the gate, Knott. Looked up at him and kind of made a little joke about it, and I was greeted by a pale, cold stare. I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me or if I was just tired, but he was wearing a uniform that would have probably been worn in the early 2000s. I could barely speak, and I didn't move a muscle. I finally choked up saying that he can go, and while he lowered his card, he didn't look away from me while he drove. I thought it was odd and creepy, and I mentioned it to the other sentries in the shack. The dude with NMCB4 told me in a legend has it but I don't kind of believe it type way that Eric Knott wasn't supposed to die that day in Fallujah. He didn't know the specifics, but the rumour was that the command he was with fucked up, and his spirit will sometimes come back to scoff at the gate they named after him to try and make up for their mistake. When he showed me a picture of Eric Knott, my heart sank. All I could choke up was, that was the fucking dude. He didn't believe me, of course, and was convinced I was just tired. But now, every time I man the watch at Knott Gate, I just hope that Petty Officer Knott won't decide to come through. It's only happened once and everyone kind of laughs it off. I do too, but inside I believe I saw him. Still angry at his superiors for letting him die. There's one thing here that we need to discuss because we've had multiple episodes now where this is mentioned. How are these ghosts driving cars? How is the car also a ghost? Because a car can't die. I mean, it can break down, which we class as death, not the same thing. The engine can die, but its actual materials, yes, it's made of vibrating atoms that are so small that we can't see. Yes, it is energy. Is that enough? Is that enough to make it multi-dimensional? Or is it that this spirit is going about his everyday life and wants to drive his car, which instantly makes the car a spirit because he's got inside the car and he's dead? I need to know your thoughts. This is going to keep me up at night now, because how the hell was he able to angrily drive through past this guy with physical headlights in this world that this guy can see, and then he could drive past him and let him in? I don't understand. I need someone who's way smarter than me to actually explain that to me, please. And you're not allowed to say it didn't happen because that's not an option, okay? Now, this one is from Medium E, and they wrote it 5 years ago, and they say, here's a military legend that will give you some chills. And they say, okay, so I've never been much of a Reddit guy, but recently I've gotten into it out of interest for these isolated cases found 30 or 40 miles in the woods. You know how it goes. A few hours pass and I find myself here. Fair enough, I love Reddit too. I totally get it. Anyways, I grew up in a military family, which is probably why I currently serve. And I've heard endless stories about combat, barracks, shenanigans, and things of that sort, so I never paid a whole lot of attention. One night, my uncle told me a story that I'd have a hard time forgetting. I realised this was because you never hear of ghost stories in the military, so here it goes. One night around 3 a.m, an MP sits alone at one of the back gates of a small National Guard post in Mississippi. It was cold outside, so he sat inside of his guard box with a small space heater and a coffee cup. He would have to radio in every hour or so in order to let his command know that he was okay and nothing had occurred throughout the night. As he sat alone reading a book, he heard a small wail coming from a few hundred yards up the gravel road he was posted at. It was too dark to see that far, so he left the inside of his guard box to get a better look. At this point, he was startled because the scream sounded like something out of a horror film, deep and sorrowful. To his surprise, after staring into the darkness for a moment, a young woman appears. She was covered in blood and limping down the road. Still distraught and screaming, she makes her way closer and closer to him. At this point, the soldier takes off in her direction in order to provide any medical aid he could. Once they meet, she starts screaming that she had a wreck a ways up the road and her child was in the car. She begged him to go save my child. Realizing how cold it was, he wrapped his fleece jacket around her body, covering it in blood. He placed her back in the guard box and took off in a sprint down the road. He arrived to find the car flipped upside down and a small child unharmed and crying in the back. Once he removed the child and laid him on the road, he went back to check if anyone else was in the car. When he arrived back at the car, he couldn't believe what he saw. It was the woman from before, bloody and dead in the front seat, still strapped in. He removed her from the car and checked for a pulse, but she was gone. He grabbed the child and hurried back to the guard box in order to radio up to his unit. Upon his arrival, he finds his fleece jacket laying on the ground outside the box without a trace of blood on it. Oh, that's a cool one, isn't it? We don't know if that's true, obviously. We don't know if any of these are true, but that spirit was desperate for someone to save her child. And how absolutely awful that child now has to grow up without his mum. That's a very sad story and very creepy. I'm sure that they're not the first person that I've experienced something like that. This next one was written 5 years ago. Someone's deleted their name, so I can't credit them. And they've titled it, Here's a Story for You. I used to work in a military cemetery carrying caskets and doing rifle detail. I always felt like it felt like a place of unfinished business because many of the tombstones are men under 25 who died in faraway wars. While I felt this way, I rarely ever encountered much except my own shadow in the cemetery. Well, one day we were standing around waiting to conduct a funeral when I realised I had to pee. The facilities were closed and locked for the weekend, and I had a 2-hour-plus ceremony about to occur. So I ran into the woods a few hundred feet out of view of anyone into the side of the road of the cemetery with no graves, far away from the actual tombstones to go. I went in reasonably far to be respectful. I crossed a point and stopped dead in my tracks because I felt really, really sad. Like, so depressed and overwhelmed, I wanted to sit down and weep on the ground, which turned into raw hot anger that made my skin burn. Obviously, I can't just sit down in the woods though, so I keep walking a few feet and stepped over a log and tripped over a tombstone in the middle of the woods. It turned out I had stumbled across a very, very old part of the cemetery that predated all of the graves currently being maintained. Like, all of our tombstones go back to the late 1800s, and this was greystone from easily the early 1800s to 1700s that did not match the rest of the cemetery at all and was still barely standing. Of course, I didn't pee because I felt like I was being screamed at to leave. The urge to run away hit me square in the face, but I turned and walked out of the woods the way I came. As soon as I started walking away, the anger, sadness, and dread leached off me, and I went back to feeling normal again. I'm sure somebody has a fantastic, cynical explanation for that, but my interpretation has always been that whoever was buried there was just unhappy about being disturbed and angry about being forgotten, and they just took it out on whoever stumbled into that part of the woods. A friend of mine had a similar experience later in the same area without me ever telling him what happened to me. This is why tombs are so important. There is a church in town where I live, and they've now turned it into a tiny car park. And when I did my ghost walk, we stopped outside there, and they've got the tombstones just laid up against the back wall. And we were all absolutely disgusted because this car park isn't really necessary. There are car parks in town. There's places you can park your car that are near this area. They have essentially disturbed these spirits' peace for no real reason. No one really parks there anyway. When I say car park, I don't mean for people who attend the church. I mean for the people who work at the church. So there must be like one car there at a time if I ever see any in there. Most of the time it's empty, which makes me feel like it's even more pointless because there's gates either side as well. And one side's always open and the other side in town is always locked because that's on quite a busy road with shops on it. It just seems really unfair to disturb gravestones, and I haven't spent a lot of time in that area, but I wonder if it is a hotspot for activity because they feel disrespected. I'm really happy that this person did not pee on the gravestones. That would have been an attachment situation. They would have been followed and probably like scratched, wouldn't they, for peeing on someone's grave. I think I would probably follow someone home and give them a little scratch for that too. Maybe use their toilet, ramp up their water bill. That would be my punishment for them. I think it's a good one. This next story is from someone called Nextshade. They wrote it 8 years ago and they've put a creepy military story. And they say, among the many ghost stories told during the lull periods of lengthy military exercises, the one that stood out to me the most in Singapore is probably that of the third door of Charlie Company. In short, it was about how the third door was made to allow the spirit of a recruit who died a gruesome and mysterious death to leave peacefully. There was even a local movie made about the incident called 2359 that you can find on YouTube. I have personally seen this third door, so at least there's some credence to the story. My story, however, happened many years later when the camp was largely unused. My company was planning to use the rifle range near the camp for our annual rifle proficiency test, which lasted several days. I was selected to be part of a very small advance party that would arrive a few days before the main body. The barracks of the camp were essentially longhouses separated by their respective toilets and laundry areas. My platoon mates and I would occupy one of the longhouses during the night, where we would play cards and tell creepy stories to pass the time. It was almost midnight, and I needed to relieve myself. I had just stepped out of the barrack when I noticed that the lights of the toilet belonging to Charlie Company had suddenly come on. The bright white light cast a clear shadow of a man onto the water point of the laundry area. I froze. There was a voice telling me to go and investigate while another told me to grab my friends. The shadow didn't seem to budge at all during the whole time I was observing it. Then I heard my friend calling for me. This snapped me out of it and I rushed back in and pulled my friends out to show them what I saw. However, by then, the lights had already gone off. My friends suggested that it was probably the range warden, which was the only logical explanation. What really puzzled me then was that my friend had called out to me because I had been gone for too long, but yet, in my mind, the whole thing only lasted a minute or two. The next day, I quizzed the range warden about the incident, and a worried look came over his face as he explained that he was nowhere near the camp the night before. What's more perplexing was that the power to Charlie Company had long been cut. Talk about a squeaky bum moment. And why did that spirit decide to show himself to that guy? Maybe these spirits just like every now and then they're like, I'm not getting enough attention. Or hang on a minute, let me scare the shit out of someone so I can get some food, some energy food. And then, I'll go back to being kosher again and everything's good. Very interesting that he felt like he was stood there for a long time as well. Did he enter some kind of different time and that's why he was able to see it? Because that Charlie Company did not have any electricity to it. So was it a different time period that he was witnessing that did have the electricity go into it? And there was someone in there maybe witnessing him thinking, who the hell is that in there? And they were in different dimensions. Freaky stuff, we'll never know. Let me know what you think. Now, this is from Day Davy, and they wrote it 5 years ago, and it's called Haunted Military House. And they say, this post relates to a house I lived in almost 6 years ago now, but still gives me the heebie-jeebies, or as I like to say, the heebie-jeebies, when I think about it. I'm from the US and my husband is in the military in the UK. All this started when I was first joining him after we got married. We were allocated a house in Scotland. Firstly, wasn't a great start as my mum and I decided to Google Earth my new address and of course straight away saw something terrifying looking in one of the upstairs windows, but we laughed about it and I didn't think twice. I then moved. From the get-go, I hated the feeling in the house. It just felt eerie to me. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, like someone was watching me. Just got creepy vibes constantly. Then started noticing weird things, like the spare room door would not stay shut. She says, I would shut it and then put in brackets where the door latch would be secure, go in my bedroom and come out and it would be open again. I seriously hated that room. I never went in there. Always felt cold and off-putting to me. Then random stuff would happen, like I'd go downstairs in the middle of the night and find the door to our backyard wide open. And she's put, I'm a worrier, never go to bed without locking and rechecking all doors. Random stuff like that. Then the sound started. All the time I would hear someone going up and down the stairs. My husband acknowledged these noises too. I seriously hated being in that house alone. I would cry if my husband had to go away for work and I had to be home alone. It was absolutely awful. Anyways, my best friend decided to come and visit from California for 2 weeks. I joked around with her about how she got to stay in the haunted room and she literally told me to F off. She didn't believe or care in any crap like that. The following morning, after her first night there, she said something to me about coming into her room that night. I was baffled as I didn't. And she proceeded to tell me that she woke up to a feeling of her upper body being pinned down and her legs not. She said she thought I came in and asked her if she was okay, but she couldn't speak back. This totally could have been sleep paralysis, but whatever it was freaked her out enough to the point where she wouldn't stay in that room for the remainder of her trip. Fast forward to the end of her trip, it was the day before she was getting ready to fly home. Just so happened that my husband was leaving on a work trip the same day. He comes in from work all excited to tell me something. Turns out that he was speaking with someone from work. These are all military quarters, military-only neighborhoods. And he had mentioned that I thought our house was haunted. The guy proceeded to tell my husband he had a friend that lived in a house on our street who thought their house was haunted. The family ended up picking up and moving abruptly after the final straw when the mum walked up and heard her daughter talking to someone. When asked who, the daughter replied, "The man at the end of my bed." The guy said the military allowed them to switch houses as long as they signed something stating they wouldn't disclose their address to anyone because they didn't want the house to sit empty. Needless to say, I was so excited the day we got to move. Never since have I felt anything like that or been scared to stay on my own, etc. I just thought I'd share my story. That's brilliant, isn't it? Because it was clearly that house that was not allowed to be stated, because that's the only one with some spooky shit going on. And I know Scotland's got some old stuff in. Again, Scotland, military stuff. It's just the perfect storm, isn't it? It's the perfect storm for haunting. That's all it is. Now, this is my last story, and it's written by someone called Don Leon 710, and they wrote it 6 years ago. And the title is Even Marines Can Become Afraid. If you're a Marine and you're going to be afraid, we're here for the story. Let's buckle in, everyone. Sorry if you can hear that my voice is going. Can you tell that I never shut up? I'm not really sure why. Sometimes if I'm out and about, or, back in the day when I used to have a little sing-along in the nightclubs and stuff like that, it would just go the next day. It's a very sensitive little voice box. And I guess where I don't shut up, it probably just needs a rest, to be honest, which I will give it this weekend. Anyway, so this person says, The events discussed have never been spoken to anyone else in full, and this is the first time I've written them down or documented them in any way. Can you just, for a moment, imagine how excited I was reading that sentence? I was like, please do continue, Mr. Reddit person or Mrs. Reddit person. I think it's a man, I'm not sure. Especially when you live for ghost stories like this. It was so exciting. And they say, maybe it's because I thought of it to be insignificant to others, or they wouldn't have believed me. Either way, it still chills me to the bone and gives me goosebumps every time I think about it. I was enlisted in the Marine Corps, and while I was in the MOS school, the school where you learn the job in the military, back in the winter of 2015, we had several strange occurrences happen. It felt like everything about Camp Johnson was strange, but I digress. My MOS school was constantly circling through people as the older ones went off to the fleet and the new ones came in to pick up a class. It always seemed like there were new people who didn't know the everyday routine and would get us into trouble. Every night it seemed like someone was running out late to formation, and that's how we accounted for everyone before we went to bed. No one went to bed until everyone was accounted for. If a Marine got drunk as piss and showed up 3 hours late, we would be standing there waiting. If a Marine was running out late, mostly everyone would yell out, "Runner!" to encourage that person to not be late again and to be embarrassed in front of everyone. I would hate that. I would hate to wait 3 hours for someone. I'd probably end up just doing really, stupid things to them as punishment. Maybe just gluing their shoes to the floor or something. Anything, just a punishment. You can't keep someone up for 3 hours. They want to go to bed. Especially in this military environment, it's bloody exhausting. Anyway, they say once everyone was accounted for, we would then post a guard on each of the floors in both barracks, and everyone would be confined to their rooms for the night. Their doors weren't locked or anything, they just weren't supposed to come out. The duty would post in the middle of the hall and would walk back and forth occasionally. It was just one long hall, a bunch of doors, and a staircase on both ends of the hall. Anyone out of their rooms would immediately be spotted. The first and second events occurred when I was on duty. The third event happened in front of the entire formation. Because of this, I will always believe in the paranormal. The first occurrence I merely chalked up to as being weird at the time and decided to leave it at that. I was posted on duty on the second floor reading my investment book that I had picked up the day before, when all of a sudden I heard footsteps coming down the hall on my floor to the left. I thought someone was out of their room and looked up to find nothing. I went up a floor and down a floor and asked both Marines that were posted if they had seen or heard anything, to which they both told me no. That put me on edge a little, but I thought I was just hearing things and immediately dismissed it. I went back to my floor and jumped back into my book. In the middle of winter, North Carolina can get pretty frigid, and the barracks were always looked at as the warm, safe haven. That's why the coldness stood out. The barracks were never cold enough to make you shiver. I decided I was too cold to just sit there and read, so I started to pace back and forth in the hall to warm myself up. The entire time I had this sense of pure anxiety, but again chalked it up to my mind playing tricks on me, and I must be tired. But those footsteps couldn't get out of my head, and a couple of times it sounded like they were behind me. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out again, but I try to rationalize everything. As I'm walking from one end of the hall to the other, I pass through a very cold spot, and the hair on the back of my neck just stood up. The cold spot was very distinct as I had been pacing back and forth and never felt it. I immediately stopped in my tracks and slowly turned around, only to be greeted by an empty hall. Once again, I tried to rationalize this and chalk it up to an anomaly, but I had to make sure the cold spot wasn't still there. As I turned around and go to step, the light above me blows out. Not just dim or anything, but actually explodes. At this point, I'm done and just get back to my chair and read my book. I was too freaked to put up with scary bullshit. The next morning, I chalked the entire night up to just being a weird night and thought no one would believe me, even if I did tell them. The second encounter occurred about a week or so later when I was on duty on the second floor again. This was where the hair on the back of my neck truly stands up, because now I know what I saw and heard that night, and that will never leave me. As I'm trying to finish that same investment book, I heard laughing and footsteps coming from the left stairwell. I get up to go and look, but this time someone is looking back as a dark figure is peeking around the corner to the stairwell. Only the top of their head and their eyes was showing at a 90-degree angle to the door frame, as if they were parallel to the door, with both hands next to his face grabbing the side of the door frame. He was only there for a mere second, if that, but I instantly froze with fear. When the figure jutted back into the stairwell, I snapped out of my panic trance I instantly ran down the hall, telling the person, or what I thought to be a person, to come back as they shouldn't be out of their room this late and need to go back. Once I hit the stairwell, I know that I would be able to hear which way the person went, as the stairs are noisy if you're running up and down them. I heard nothing. Again, I went to the duty above and the duty below, and neither of them saw anything. The only thing they heard was me when I called out to the person. I told them I thought I saw someone out of their room and to just keep an eye out. I used the same stairwell I came from and went back to my floor. As I turned the corner from the stairwell, I saw it again, but this time for slightly longer. It was on the opposite stairwell, looking at me in the exact same position. Again, I froze in fear. I felt like prey at this point, but my mind again tried to justify this figure as a person. And just as I started to move to a full sprint to the other side, this thing juts back into the stairwell. Once I reach the stairwell, I stop and listen. Silence. I then run up and down the stairs, telling the duties to help me search the building. At the end of the search, we found nothing. At this point, I was no longer thinking this was just a person and went back to my floor. The rest of the night was fairly quiet and didn't hear much of anything, but I was still anxious and freaked out. As my shift was ending and I was anxiously waiting for my relief, I went to the window next to the stairwell we usually did the turnover at. When I looked out to the parking lot, I saw someone running out in the grass. Anyone who's been to the Marine Corps knows you don't step on the grass. And as I went to try to get a better look, my relief came up the stairs and I looked away. When I went to go look back, no one was there. This was too late and too early for anyone to be awake. I remember that, but I don't remember the exact time. I know what I saw that night and it still gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. Now, this third encounter isn't nearly as creepy as the second. But the fact that I wasn't the only one who saw this makes it the scariest for me, as it's been confirmed by others, and I know I wasn't just seeing things. We were all standing in our formations, 2 formations on the left and the right, and 2 formations facing towards the barracks. The 2 barracks buildings faced each other with one central walkway leading out towards the parking lot where we were. As runners came out, everyone could see them. I was in one of the formations that faced the barracks. Usually during this time, plenty of people would be talking, even though they weren't supposed to. But this night was different. Everyone was quiet. To this day, I still don't understand why. My formation and the formations around me had gotten accountability, and no one was missing from them. The new guys were still trying to organise themselves, so I assumed they were missing a person. When I saw a runner come out, I called it, and so did a few others, but not nearly the amount that usually do. This night had no moon, so it was really dark, and I was trying to see who the runner was, so I was just staring at him, trying to get a better look. He runs up the walkway to the left of the roundabout, his right, and turns on the sidewalk. I'm still trying to see who it is, but I'm assuming it's a new guy. Now, in between the sidewalk and the parking lot, there is a patch of grass and some trees. He vanished. Confused, I said out loud, "What the fuck?" And the guy next to me looked as pale as a ghost and said, "You saw that too?" Just to confirm, I asked what he saw, and he said, "A runner, but he disappeared behind the tree." At this point, every fibre in my body turns cold and everyone starts clamouring pretty loudly. Our instructor turns up and tells everyone to shut up, and we go back to being silent. This seems like it would be a massive talking point. I actually never spoke about this incident to anyone else there, and I never heard anyone else talk about it. I think it was so real we just didn't want to bring it up, or maybe people just didn't believe it. The "you saw it too" still proves to me that what I saw that day was real. Whatever the reason for no one talking about it, I know that these encounters will haunt me till the day I die. My gut feeling with this guy that was in the hallway that's just like flitting around really quickly and he's like running up and down the stairwell trying to get him, whatever. My interpretation of that, that's just like a jestful spirit of a soldier who died there, and he knew he wasn't allowed to walk on that grass. So he's like, "Right, up yours then. I'll do what I want now." Either he doesn't know that he's dead and he's doing it, getting away with it, thinking he's having a right laugh, no one's telling him off, or whether he knows that he's dead and he's just doing it because he's like, "Right, you can't do nothing about this, have some of this." And maybe in his mind as well, being like the late one, for them to have to shout out "runner" is funny to him. And he was like, "I'm just going to pretend to be one of them." Boop, disappear behind this tree. Ah, lovely job. Like, I don't know. He might just be doing it because there's still someone in there and he just wants to pretend that it's him that is being accounted for, whereas they are actually one short. I don't know. But either way, hilarious. And I just get a real trickster kind of vibe from him. I don't think he's malicious. But I still wouldn't like to see him. Thank you very much. Especially if I was doing that garden. I wouldn't like to do that on my own. Fire garden and all the kind of like watches where you have to just sit there on your own. I would hate that. And to think, I was actually going to try and join the Air Force at one point when I was younger, because I've just never really knew what I wanted to do. Obviously, I found out later on in life, but I thought the Air Force would be a really cool one to do, you know? I'm just really happy I didn't, because it's all very scary. It's all very scary. Now, listen, that's all I've got time for tonight. I hope that you have enjoyed listening to these stories. I'm going to go and take Lukey, the dog, on a lovely walk around the nature reserve, get these last little trails of sunshine, feel the radiance on my face, absolutely love life. And again, if you want to support by going to grab yourself a hoodie or a t-shirt, please do, or a mug, please do. Now, the mug is like over 11 quid, okay? It's not my doing, it's the dropship company. It seems ridiculous, but it is all black and the print does look really cool on it, and I will be ordering myself one. So there's that. And just a little side note as well, I know I've spoke to you guys a lot about the bereavements that I've had this year. I've actually been to 3 funerals this year, and one was my uncle's, one was for a 44-year-old, and there was one this week for a 34-year-old, which is absolutely diabolical. Don't want to go into much more personal detail about who they were to me, but it's been horrific. And I think because of that, I would just like to, maybe for a short period of time for each one, kind of just give to a couple of different charities. For each sale, hopefully I can give sort of £1 or so away to a charity, the British Heart Foundation, and most likely the I don't know what they're called, like Dorset helicopter, the people basically who save people in the helicopters. I can't think what the name's called, but I will find it. I'm probably going to be giving money to them anyway myself, but that would be really nice, I think, and it would make me feel really good to be able to donate to them. And that's not to get you to buy, that's just kind of a thought out loud. I think that's the right thing to do, considering how shit the last 2 months have been for my family and people close to me. It's not much, but you know, if it helps them continue to get research and it helps these helicopters continue to pay for the fuel that help people, it's good enough for me. Anyway, that's my rambling done. Have a wonderful day, and I will catch you in the next one.